35 years of watching this game teaches you something that no film session can. It teaches you what a laugh means. Not the kind that fills a locker room after a buzzer beater. Not the kind you hear in a dugout when someone trips over a water cooler. The kind Yeng Guiao unleashed when the names Caracut and Belen came up in conversation. That laugh, low and slow and deliberate, carries the weight of a verdict. And when Yeng Guiao renders a verdict, the Philippine Basketball Association tends to pay attention. It has been paying attention to him for more than 3 decades, through championship runs and rebuilds, through the fire drill pressure defenses that became his signature, through the Gilas Pilipinas campaigns that redefined what this country believes is possible on a basketball court. When that man laughs, it is not amusement. It is judgment rendered with a smile. But before we reckon with what those words mean, the league absorbed something else. Something physical. Something irreversible in the short term and potentially catastrophic in the long one. Justin Brownlee, Barangay Ginebra's most transformative player since Robert Jaworski was still running sideline to sideline, came up lame in the contest against rain or shine, and the sound that rippled through the crowd, that sharp collective intake of breath, was the kind you only hear when a packed arena simultaneously understands that something important has just broken. Not just a body. A season's worth of assumptions. The Philippine Basketball Association has always been a league of emotion. That is not a criticism. It is the very quality that separates it from every professional basketball league on earth. The passion of the Ginebra faithful, the rivalry architecture of the SMB Ginebra axis, the regional pride encoded in every franchise logo, these are not incidental features of the product. They are the product. And so when news crosses 2 storylines in the same news cycle, a legend mocking 2 veterans with a single laugh, and the league's most compelling naturalized player limping to the locker room, the implications spiral outward in ways that demand careful, unhurried analysis. The Philippine basketball fan deserves that analysis. Not hot takes. Not noise. Sustained examination. The PBA was founded in 1975, making it the 2nd oldest professional basketball league in the world, behind only the NBA. Think about that for a moment. When David Stern was still a young attorney in New York, Filipino professional basketball had already been running for a year. The league carries the full weight of that history in every game, in its traditions, in its franchises, in the towering reputations of the men who shaped it. Guiao is one of those men. So is the institution of Ginebra. So, in a different and more combustible way, is San Miguel. And Brownlee, in the compressed timeline of the naturalized player experiment, has become something the PBA has never quite had before. A foreign-born athlete whose allegiance to the Philippine basketball cause appears genuine, whose adoption of the flag was not a contractual convenience but a personal commitment that took him through FIBA qualifying campaigns and Asian Games competition. His body, then, is not merely a team asset. It is a national one. That context is why the timing of these 2 storylines, colliding in the same news cycle, feels less like coincidence and more like a referendum on where the PBA currently stands. Begin with Guiao, because Guiao is always the right place to begin. He is, at 71 years of age, the most tactically literate head coach the Philippine game has ever produced. That claim is defensible. His peers would argue it, some of them volubly, but argument is impossible without acknowledging that no other figure in PBA coaching history has replicated what Guiao did across multiple franchises, with wildly different personnel, in different eras of the game. Pure Foods. Rain or Shine. NLEX. Gilas. The man has won wherever organizational dysfunction did not actively undermine him, and sometimes he won despite it. His system, the high-pressure half-court defense combined with a relentless transition attack, was revolutionary for a league that had grown comfortable with half-court slugfests built around big men who could post up. Guiao forced pace. He forced mistakes. He forced opposing coaches to abandon what they had spent years building. So when Guiao laughs at a player, or 2 players in this case, the dismissal carries a very specific type of authority. This is not a pundit laughing. This is not a fan in the bleachers laughing. This is a man who has stood across the sideline from those players and calculated, with clinical precision, what they can and cannot do against organized opposition at the highest level of Philippine professional basketball. His laugh is a scouting report compressed into a single audible note. What exactly triggered the moment matters less than what it reveals about the current valuation of veteran fringe players in this league. Caracut has spent the better part of his career as a competent, occasionally brilliant secondary guard, The kind of player whose stat line rarely jumps off the page, but whose ability to create for others in the pick and roll and to body up point guards in man coverage makes him genuinely useful. Belen, similarly, represents a category of PBA veteran whose value has always been situational. The reliable role player who knows the system, communicates well in the half-court, and rarely makes the catastrophic mistake that costs a game in its final possessions. These are not players who win championships by themselves. These are players who, placed correctly within a functioning system, allow champions to breathe. Guiao's laugh suggests he does not believe either man, at this stage, represents that value. Or perhaps, and this reading is more generous to all parties, the laugh was aimed not at the players themselves, but at whoever proposed them as solutions to a problem they are no longer equipped to solve. The PBA has a complicated history with aging veterans who are retained past their optimal window, usually for reasons that have more to do with franchise loyalty and marketing than with basketball logic. Guiao has spent his career fighting that tendency. His willingness to publicly, audibly dismiss the suggestion that Caracut and Belen represent meaningful options is entirely consistent with a coaching philosophy that has always prioritized systemic fit over sentimentality. The San Miguel reaction, whatever precise form it took, must be understood against the backdrop of what the Beermen represent in this league's power structure. San Miguel is not merely a franchise. It is the dominant organism in the PBA's competitive ecosystem, the team against which all others measure their ambitions and calibrate their rosters. Their reaction to Guiao's words, to any significant piece of news in the league, frankly, carries a secondary layer of meaning because SMB operates from a position of structural confidence that very few franchises in professional basketball history have ever enjoyed. The depth of their roster, the organizational stability provided by the San Miguel Corporation's resources, the championship habits baked into their culture across multiple PBA eras, all of it means that when the Beermen respond to something, the response itself is a form of leverage. If the SMB reaction to Guiao's dismissal of those veteran guards was skeptical, it may reflect something more tactical than personal. Because what Guiao's laugh implicitly argues is a vision of Philippine basketball that prizes athleticism, pace, and youth over the reliable competence of experienced players. San Miguel has benefited enormously, at various points, from exactly the kind of veteran reliability that Guiao just laughed off. Their reaction, then, might be less about defending Caracut and Belen specifically and more about defending a philosophy of roster construction that the Beermen have found consistently profitable. But all of that, the coaching philosophy debate, the organizational posturing, the veteran valuation question, recedes almost entirely when placed beside what happened to Justin Brownlee. An injury to Brownlee is, by some distance, the most significant single-player injury any PBA team can sustain. This is not hyperbole. Brownlee, since becoming a naturalized Filipino citizen and assuming eligibility status as a local player rather than an import, has functioned as Ginebra's engine, their closer, and their identity. The Gin Kings have always been a team built on mythology, on the Jaworski legacy, on the feverish devotion of a fan base that turns every Ginebra game into something that transcends sport, but mythology does not win championships. Brownlee wins championships. Or rather, Brownlee creates the conditions under which Ginebra's mythology can be validated by competitive results. He is the bridge between the emotional reality that Ginebra's fans inhabit and the tactical reality of the modern PBA half-court. At 6 feet and 2 inches, Brownlee operates at a size that makes him a mismatch problem at multiple positions. Against guards, his strength and length are overwhelming. Against bigger forwards, his quickness and first step generate either a quality shot or a trip to the foul line. His usage rate at crunch time, the percentage of Ginebra's possessions that run through him in the final 4 minutes of close games, is consistently among the highest in the league. When other teams prepare for Ginebra, they prepare for Brownlee. Scheme after scheme has been constructed with the singular purpose of making Brownlee uncomfortable, packing the paint, switching everything defensively, deploying physical defenders who can absorb his drives without fouling. None of it has worked reliably, because Brownlee's basketball intelligence is commensurate with his physical gifts. He does not merely have talent. He has judgment, which makes an injury during a rain or shine contest the kind of event that reshuffles the competitive mathematics of the entire conference. Because Ginebra without Brownlee is not Ginebra minus one player. It is a fundamentally different team, one that asks its supporting cast to carry burdens they have never had to carry before, that forces opponents to recalibrate their game plans in ways they may not have prepared for, and that raises genuine questions about whether the Gin Kings can survive a stretch of games against playoff-caliber competition without their best player. Rain or shine, the Elasto Painters, is not a team that anyone can afford to overlook when the standings are tight. Their organizational identity has always been built around effort and cohesion rather than individual star power, a model that, in the compressed schedule and physical demands of the PBA season, often outperforms more talented but less connected rosters. The fact that Brownlee's injury occurred against ROS rather than against one of the conference's elite teams is significant in a way that might initially seem counterintuitive. It suggests the injury was not born from a moment of intense defensive pressure from a dominant opposition scheme. More likely it arose from exactly the kind of contested, physical, back-and-forth basketball that a scrappy Rain or Shine team reliably produces, the kind of game that asks everything from a player like Brownlee because the competition never lets him coast, never lets him pick and choose his spots. That relentlessness extracts a physical price over a long season. Now, Ginebra's coaching staff faces decisions that have no clean answers. How many games does Brownlee miss? What is the nature of the injury? If it is soft tissue, ankle, knee, hamstring, the timeline is educated guesswork at best. If it is structural, the calculus changes dramatically. The bracket implications are immediate. A Ginebra team already navigating the brutal compression of a PBA conference schedule now must patch together victories without its most reliable creator. Their margin for error, already thin against SMB and other top seeds, effectively disappears. The broader league implication is one that Philippine basketball has always understood but rarely articulates directly. The naturalized player experiment is a high-wire act. When a Brownlee-class talent is on the floor, Ginebra is a championship-caliber team. When he is not, they are, by any honest assessment, a team with a passionate fan base, a great legacy, and a significant gap in their ability to generate offense against organized half-court defenses. The league's rules around naturalized players were designed, in part, to address this dependency risk. But Ginebra built their current identity around Brownlee so completely that the rules and the reality have drifted apart. That gap is now very visible. Step back far enough from the noise of a single news cycle and what you see is a league at a crossroads, not a crisis, but a genuine moment of inflection. Yeng Guiao's laugh is not really about Caracut and Belen. It is about what the next generation of PBA basketball needs to look like. The veterans he dismissed are, in a sense, stand-ins for an entire philosophy of roster construction that the league has leaned on for decades. The reliable local, the experienced glue guy, the player who will not embarrass you but will not transform you either. Guiao's career-long argument is that Philippine basketball must demand more of its local talent, must be willing to invest in the uncomfortable process of developing young players who are raw and inconsistent but who will eventually close the developmental gap that the naturalized player rules were designed to paper over. The laugh is his thesis statement, compressed into a single public moment. Brownlee's injury makes that argument simultaneously more urgent and more complicated. More urgent because it exposes how dependent certain franchises have become on their naturalized player in ways that leave the local talent underdeveloped. More complicated because Brownlee himself is, in the most literal sense, now a local player, a Filipino citizen who has represented the national flag in FIBA competition, who has made a commitment to this country that extends beyond a contract. His injury is not the injury of a foreign import. It is the injury of a Filipino athlete. That distinction matters enormously, both for how the league should respond and for how the fans should process it. The next 5 years of PBA basketball will be shaped, more than anything else, by whether the league can produce local players who make the naturalized player debate feel less existential. The pipeline exists. The Filipino athlete is not, by any measure, diminished in the qualities that make for exceptional basketball. The quickness, the court sense, the competitive will, the unbreakable connection to the game that has been woven into this nation's culture since the 1920s. What the pipeline lacks is time, resources, and the organizational commitment to allow young players to struggle productively through their early professional years rather than being asked to be ready before they are. Guiao has always understood this. His laugh at Caracut and Belen is really an impatient man's way of saying, we cannot keep cycling through the same solutions and expecting different outcomes. The veterans served their purpose. A new generation must now be built, intentionally and without shortcuts. Brownlee, when he heals, and there is every reason to believe he will return to a league that needs him differently than it needed him 5 years ago. Not as a one-man solution. As the veteran presence around whom younger Filipino talent can develop in real competitive situations. That reframing of his role is not a diminishment. It is the natural evolution of a player whose best contribution to Philippine basketball may ultimately be less about the championships he wins and more about the players who watch him work every day and quietly raise their own standards. The laugh will fade. The injury will heal. What will not fade, what does not heal on any particular timeline, is the underlying question that both moments illuminate. What does Philippine basketball want to be? A league that imports its excellence and celebrates it? Or a league that grows its own, slowly and painfully and gloriously? Guiao already answered that question. He answered it 30 years ago with a press defense and a fast break and a roster full of players nobody else believed in. He is still answering it, one dismissive laugh at a time, because the question itself has not changed, and he has never been the kind of man who stops until he believes someone is truly listening.